After the cross and the empty tomb, Jesus was available anywhere, anytime, to anyone. Now remember, before the cross, Jesus was only in one place at a time. If you could find him, he would raise your dead daughter. If you could grab his tassel, he would stop your issue of blood. If you could get in front of him and get his attention and yell loud enough, he would fix your blind eyes. If you happen to be with the other thousands, when he multiplied the loaves and the fishes, you would get fed. But Jesus was only for 33 years in one place at one time. Any doubts could be overcome, any sadness could be comforted, any disappointment could be stopped, any fearfulness could be arrested, any loneliness could be ended, and any defilement could be cleansed. But Christ's resurrection meant anyone could experience his presence anywhere at any time. In other words, all of those things that formerly, the cleansing, the everything, was only if he was there. But his resurrection made him available to everybody all the time, wherever they were. So the study I want to show you is that in the verses 11 through 18 of John 20, Christ's power to reward devotion. That goes in the first line. Devotion. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the women that were supporting Christ all through his ministry, the ones who were the last ones at the cross, the ones who were the first ones at the tomb, the men were hiding in the room. They were afraid. In fact, tomorrow morning we're going to start there at the upper room. The upper room's big. It was the hideout. It was where Jesus met with them and prepared them, but they were hiding. The women were at the tomb first. They were last at the cross. The disciples fled. Only John stayed, and the women. And what we see as you read this is Jesus rewarded those women devotion. Did you know the apostles weren't the first ones to see him? Do you know why? Because Jesus, it's not that he was putting the apostles down, he was rewarding the intense devotion of the women. And that shows me you don't have to have a position to be close to the Lord. The ones with the position didn't get to see him first. What he looks at is the heart. And no matter who we are, no matter whether we're in a position or not, he responds to the devotion of our hearts. And the question I have is, are you and I, are we devoted to Christ today? Do we love the Lord with all our heart? Is our desire to love and serve and worship him? Then I have good news. Jesus always rewards our devotion. He knows our heart's desire. He rewards our devotion. It's Christ's power to redeploy the committed. Committed. The first group were those with devotion, the devoted ones, but these are the committed ones. And basically who I'm talking about here are the disciples. See, they scattered at Gethsemane. They hid at Galilee. Only Peter, and then he denied. The rest of the disciples, other than John, John's the only one that was stellar, you know. He stayed at Gethsemane, Galilee, he's at the cross. He's amazing. But all the rest fled, but they were committed to Christ. They were from, and we're going there, from where they were called. We're going right to Bethsaida, right to Capernaum, right to the shore where they were called, and for 3.5 years they followed Christ. But he redeployed the committed. In other words, what he did is, and we're actually going to have a service right on the seashore, and we're going to relive Jesus saying to Peter, feed my sheep. Second time, feed my sheep. Third time, feed my sheep. See, 3 times Jesus redeployed, reinitiated Peter's call. You know what that means? It means sometimes we who are committed to the Lord kind of need a renewal of that. So I wrote down, are you committed to Christ this morning, but it's not like it was way back then when you were first saved? You know, most of us can remember some time in the past when we were more zealous. It's like we just couldn't get enough of the Word and fellowship. And if you can remember a time that you had more fire and more devotion than you used to have, then the good news is, just like Christ visited those deeply committed disciples, this morning Jesus wants to anoint us afresh and anew with his Spirit. There's one last group at the bottom. The women were the devoted ones, and Jesus showed himself to Mary and the other women first. The disciples were the committed ones, but the last group, Christ's power to reconfirm the faith of the doubting one. That's Thomas. Thomas is our example. Thomas was one, he said, I didn't see it, and so I just am not as convinced as you. And you know what Jesus said? He said, blessed are those who haven't seen me and still believe. That means he understands when we have doubts. Did you know that doubting Thomas is an example to all of us that there are times when we don't feel close. See, the devil wants us to doubt, and he really got Thomas to doubt. So, whichever one of these three would categorize you, if you're devoted, then why don't you just take some time right now to read that section and tell the Lord to prepare for communion how much you love him. And if you're committed to him, read that section and say, Lord, I just want you to redeploy me and refill me with your Spirit. And if you're a doubter, why don't you just fall down right before the Lord, right here as you're sitting, in your heart, and say, you're my Lord and you're my God. And I'd just like to give you, we'll take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Just in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll pray, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to give my deacon, my elders here, the elements, and they're going to pass them around, and after all of us are served, we'll partake. But let's take these next few minutes, read this passage, whichever section interests you, in John chapter 20, 11 down through 31, and let's just prepare our hearts for communion.